I start this video with a disclaimer that street activism is not activism. It's one form of activism that many people mistakenly believe is representative of all activism. I've said repeatedly on this channel that the best form of activism is whatever form of activism can really play a meaningful role in your life. And that's going to be very different if you're an architect, if you're an engineer, if you work at Starbucks, if you're currently a university student. It's going to be different if your first language is Spanish or if your first language is Chinese. If you have a stutter, if you have a physical disability, you'll have different advantages and disadvantages related to all the other aspects of your life that will link to how you best can make a difference in the world. How activism, how political engagement can be a meaningful part of your life, and how you can make a meaningful difference in the world. With that caveat having been stated, I think there are very good reasons why so many vegans feel embarrassed to attend an event such as the one you've just seen on your screen. And I think they're not trivial, I think they're not catty, I think they're not shallow reasons. I think they're reasons that we should all think about and analyze very carefully.
Animals are not ours to eat! Freedom now! Freedom now! Without speciesism, all other random discrimination, like racism and sexism, wouldn't even exist. Speciesism is the root of all oppression.
The paradigm of street activism brings with it many dangerous delusions, and some of them creep up on you gradually. One of those delusions is the assumption that this represents a spontaneous outpouring of emotion, and it very rarely does. The video you've just been looking at is filmed in Toronto, Canada, a city I used to live in, a city where I attended many, many protests myself. In the history of the world, we have had examples of protests erupting at funerals, protests erupting at sporting events, protests erupting spontaneously at a march of another kind, or, of course, in response to a war. There are examples in the history of the world of sudden, unexpected public emotion, bringing crowds of people to do spontaneous things. But most of what we see, especially in 2016, these are carefully contrived events. And yet, the aesthetic of a spontaneous outpouring precludes the possibility that we really question who fashioned this message, who approved it, who consented to it, and whether or not there really was anything democratic about how the protest was put together. Now, if I attended this protest, I would find it deeply embarrassing what this man is saying on the loudspeaker. But it's most likely I would attend this protest, like the 95 people who attended this, simply in response to a post on Facebook, or an email, or a telephone message, that some electronic medium was used to contact me to invite me to attend, and that when I showed up, it was assumed I would consent to whoever that man was holding the megaphone, stating whatever message he was stating. I don't know this group. I just say from my experience with many, many protests in Canada, people are often shocked if you suggest that you should actually have a meeting making use of managerial methods to discuss with a group of people what is the message of this protest and to vote on it. To ultimately have a democratic decision-making protest say, okay, at this protest, what is it that we have to say? What is even the wording of that message that we are going to deliver? What is it that we share as values or as a message or what have you? And then in the end, ultimately, who is going to hold the microphone and say it? It may not be necessary for that message to be carefully scripted, word by word. But obviously, a fundamental question such as, do you think it is effective activism to claim that racism would cease to exist in this world if everyone were vegan? To me, that is a fundamentally absurd message that discredits veganism, that makes all of us look like fools, and that makes these people seem like they have no real-world experience. I think it's always useful with racism to take examples that are not too familiar to the people involved, that you may not have emotional attachment to. So rather than talking about, for instance, the oppression of black people in the United States of America, let me tell you, in southern Cambodia, the animosity between ethnically Vietnamese people and ethnically Cambodian people will not disappear if everyone in Cambodia becomes vegan. No chance. In northern Laos, the animosity between Thai Kadai people and Mon Khmer people and the so-called Lolo-ish people like the Aka, these aren't even ethnic groups. These are groups of groups, by the way. The intense racism that separates the Hmong from the Thai Lu in northern Laos. If all of those people became vegan, the world would become a better place in many, many ways. But racism would not disappear. I don't think racism would even be reduced by 5%. I don't believe that. And I think those examples, precisely because most people in the audience know nothing about them in a place like Laos and Cambodia, probably you can just nod your head and imagine, gee, on the other side of the world, there are different ethnic groups that hate each other for reasons I've never studied, I can't relate to. And yet I can imagine that whatever those reasons are, they're actually not rooted in dietary decisions, nor even in ethical decisions made in how they exploit animals. Now again, I might as well stick with the same time and place. I remember one of my girlfriends who identified as a feminist when we first got together. She asked about those questions, status of women in the countries I studied, places like Cambodia, Laos, Sri Lanka. And the very simple answer I gave her was, everywhere you go, it's a struggle. The status of women in Laos or Cambodia is much, much better than in Muslim countries, because we're talking about Buddhist countries versus Muslim countries. But yes, there are certainly problems with the status of women. If everyone became vegan, do I believe that the status of women would be improved? To be honest, I think the main people whose lives would be improved would be the employees of slaughterhouses and employees in animal exploiting industries, whose lives are miserable and who are predominantly men. So, yeah, in so many ways, this is just absurd and ridiculous. But in this video, what I'm trying to alert you to is the fact that you don't need to be a pawn of whoever made the first Facebook post. It doesn't make sense to pretend that these are spontaneous outpourings of emotion from people who are overwhelmed with a sudden desire to save the world. There's a deliberative process in putting together a package of meanings that you're going to try to communicate, and in choosing the methods to communicate those, whether it's a sign being held up or a drum or a form of theater on the street or getting people together to do something that in my opinion would be more productive, something that has nothing to do with street protests. And if you are going to join one of these groups, then you really do have the right to be consulted. You have the right to be part of some kind of democratic process in fashioning that message and in approving that message. And if you don't agree with the message, don't be a sheep. Don't stand there and chant. At the end of the day, you've got to walk away. You've got to say to yourself, I can do better than this. I can do better than to assent to, repeat, and chant aloud a message that actually discredits veganism, that makes all of us look like fools.
Animals are not experiments! Freedom now! Freedom now!
Most of you are blind, mute, and deaf to the most revolting cruelty and injustices perpetrated on them just because they are different.
Just because something's true does not mean that it's effective activism to scream it in the streets. And that's pretty much exactly what we're talking about here, isn't it? Is it true that the vast majority of Canadians, the vast majority of people in Toronto, Canada, are blind and mute in relation to the exploitation of animals? Yes, it is. In the footage you just saw, does it look to you like anyone in the street cares? The random assortment of individuals in the street whom you're interrupting while they do their food shopping. Do you think any of them care? In the footage I've seen from this protest, you can follow the link below this video. I think the only people who care are the people who are attending the event themselves. And I've said in earlier videos that can be meaningful in its way. It can be a rally. It can be rewarding for the people there. It can be an opportunity for them to network with each other and plan more meaningful events in the future. But the hollowness of the street protest, and even the hollowness of this type of histrionic claim, even when it's true, it's deeply embarrassing to me. It makes me feel ashamed to be a vegan, and it makes me feel ashamed to agree with her. But I come at this from a very different background from most of you. I care passionately about many, many issues that the vast majority of Canadians are blind and deaf to. I have cared for many years in my life about the situation for First Nations people, Indigenous people, American Indians, whatever term you want to use. It is entirely fair to say the vast majority of people in downtown Toronto, Canada, are blind and deaf to First Nations. Most of them, many Canadians can't even name the native people that surround the city they're living in, let alone more remote peoples. Only when there's a disaster such as mass suicide on one of the reservations did they get onto the news, etc., etc. Would it be effective activism, advocacy, politics for me to stand on the street in Toronto and scream, most of you are blind and deaf to this issue? It's true, but it's actually not my place to scream it. It's not effective activism for me to scream it. It's just not real politics. It's a phony outpouring of outrage and emotion that accomplishes nothing except perhaps for making us look like fools. And the contrast is there even in this video. All you have to do is really consider the indifference of the random members of the general public that are walking past. One of the simplest and most important ideas in the science of economics is the concept of opportunity cost. 95 people attended this protest. They could have been doing something better with that time to promote veganism. I am a vegan. I am a political vegan. But I actually believe that those 95 people, I don't know, some of them are probably brilliant, some of them are fools, I don't know any of them. They could have been making a difference inside City Hall instead of screaming on the street outside of City Hall. They could have been doing real lobbying, or they could have been doing something as humble as trying to write a children's book, or trying to influence curriculum at local board of education. Believe me, I know in this specific location, I've been inside that same City Hall. I've been involved with political lobbying on that street, on that block, in that government. I know that system. There are real opportunities for you to make a democratic difference. And they may not even realize it, but they're choosing not to make a difference in any of those ways.
This is absolutely astounding to me that we have so many people. We counted 95 people here today at the start, and that's just incredible on a Saturday like this.
À-bas-le-ciel.
For me as a vegan, it's easy to be self-righteous. It's easy for me to say, shut it all down, smash all the cages, set all the animals free. That's easy, But the whole reason why my YouTube channel exists is that I'm not really interested in easy answers to complicated questions. I'm interested in dealing with all the murky, complicated, moral gray areas.
À-bas-le-ciel.